All right, today we are going to be studying our ecosystems, or how we classify the biosphere, the hierarchy. Here we've got some doodle notes to do today, but before we're going to do some bell ringers. So tell me, which biome would I find mostly frozen soil in? Hopefully you were able to identify that the tundra has mostly frozen soil. Our next question asks us, which biome has evaporation that is greater than precipitation? Hopefully you were able to tell me that the desert has evaporation that is greater than the amount of precipitation. One of the misconceptions that I find students often have about deserts is that it doesn't rain in the desert. It does, but the problem is it's so warm and arid that we get a lot of evaporation, so much so that it takes more water vapor than is rained down, so we don't really feel the effects of the rain. If it does rain in the desert, it's still really dry. Which biome has evaporation that is less than precipitation? Another way to ask this question is, which biome has a lot of rain? Hopefully you were able to identify the tropical rainforest has a lot of rain. It has evaporation that is less than precipitation. Alright, let's try to identify this ecosystem right here. What do we got? What do you think? What biome? Hopefully you were able to tell me this is a freshwater biome. You can tell that by the frogs right there. Also, the fact that the water's closed in, it's not an ocean. What about this biome? What do we think? Hopefully the snow gave you a clue. This is a tundra. What biome do you think this is? It's more of a joke. It's not really quite a biome. It could be found anywhere. That's a box turtle right there. You've got a whole ecosystem growing on its back, which I think is just beautiful. Although this is an artistic rendition, but it's beautiful. And then what kind of biome is this here in my old country western? Hopefully you were able to identify this biome as a desert. I've got a video that describes what an ecosystem is. I'll post it online so that you can see it too. It's by the Wild Report, some of my favorite YouTube channels for learning. And here's where our notes actually start. So today we're going to define an ecosystem. Ecosystems are a community of living and non-living things. For non-living, remember we learned that term is abiotic. I cut the A off there in our notes. Non-living things, and it really shouldn't say organisms, it should say like characteristics, but those are stuff like water, sunlight, air, temperature. We also learned that altitude and latitude can be included in our abiotic factors of an ecosystem. Biotic factors are those living parts of our ecosystem, like plants, fungi, animal, bacteria, and insects. Also, don't forget about those protists we learned about, or you should have learned about in 8th grade science with Miss Campbell last year. So once we know the different parts of the ecosystem, like we learned yesterday, we use the abiotic and biotic factors of an ecosystem to help categorize them or put them into a different biome group depending on their characteristics. Not only that, the more we know about an ecosystem, the more we can see like how humans are affecting the ecosystem, or kind of just really understanding how that ecosystem works. For the next part of our notes, we're going to get into the hierarchy of ecosystems, or the hierarchy of the biosphere. So we're going to start really small, or the smallest of our ecosystem classifications here. Oh, sorry. Abiotic factors need the biotic factors need the abiotic factors to survive and thrive. I want you to think about freshwater versus saltwater fish. If I take a saltwater fish and I put it in a pond in our backyard, it most likely will not live because it doesn't have the salty water that it needs to survive. So that non-living salty water is what the biotic organism needs to survive. There are countless examples of this as well, like my plants wouldn't grow if I didn't have water and sunlight and air. And a lot of our organisms are dependent on the temperature. If it's too warm, they die. If it's too cold, they die. They need that just right Goldilocks sweet spot. Starting with our hierarchy of the ecosystems, and by the way, when you add biotic and abiotic factors together, you get the biosphere. But starting on that hierarchy of the ecosystem, we have individuals as our very smallest. This is a single living organism, so I am an individual by myself. You are an individual by yourself. If you have a pet, they're an individual by themselves, and so on and so forth. So this is one singular thing. If we move up in our classification system or hierarchy of ecology, we get our population. So this is a group of the same type of organisms living in an ecosystem. I want you to remember, and please write down in your notes somewhere, that a population is the same species. So when we are sitting in the classroom together, we are all a population because we are all humans. But if I were to include, say, the flytrap in our grouping, or to say all the things in the classroom are a population, that would not be correct because we are not the same species as a flytrap, or even the spider on the wall that I lost a couple weeks ago because I didn't want to kill it. It's still there somewhere, so there are more than one species in the room. And one of the reasons why we study this hierarchy, before I forget, of life is because when we're studying ecology, we can choose to look at an individual level and study just the individuals. We could look at the populations. We could look at the larger one that we're going to learn next, community, or even the ecosystem itself. So these are different ways that scientists can study an ecosystem, and there are also different groupings. Community is a group of different species in an ecosystem. The key here with community is that these are all living things. So now we're talking about multiple populations of species coexisting together. That's a community. Again, they're all living. So this would be like me, you, and Finn the flytrap. Or you, your guardians or parents, and your pets. That would be included. As we move up to the next step in our classification system, we finally get to ecosystems. This is all things that interact with one another. So these are the biotic plus abiotic factors, so those living and non-living things. So not only do they include the trees and the grass and the flowers and the birds and, all the other living things, but they also include the sunshine and the rain and the temperature and latitude and longitude, all those good things that we learned about. And then our very largest of our classification system is called the biosphere, which you're going to have to write down there. Biospheres are all living and non-living things on Earth. Okay, so once you've got that down, we're going to do a little practice. I'm going to put some pictures on the slide, pause the video, and then I'll give you the answer. You're going to try to identify what hierarchy of life I'm looking at here on the screen. All right, I got the world. What do you think? Your choices are individual, population, community, ecosystem, or biosphere. Hopefully you're able to tell me that this is indeed the biosphere. I've got a, almost said it, group of wolves here. What do you think? We've got individual, population, community, ecosystem, or biosphere. What do these wolves best fit? Hopefully you were able to identify population, that we just have one species here. We just got those wolves. Here I've got a coral reef. We've got some fish. We've got the coral in here. We've got some algae in here. We've got the water. We've got the oxygen that's diffused in the water. We can see the sunlight coming down in there. What is this? Hopefully you were able to identify this as an ecosystem because we've got both non-living and living things here interacting with each other. How about this handsome fellow? What do you think he is? Individual, population, community, ecosystem, or biosphere? Hopefully you were able to tell me that this is an individual. Do you know what this handsome fellow's name is? This is called the tardigrade or the water bear, and they're microscopic organisms found inside water. Pretty handsome, right? Alright, what about these? These are some more microscopic organisms. What do they look like? What do you think? Hopefully you were able to identify that this is a community. We've got the absence, hopefully, of non-living things. You can tell here, I've got this little guy right here, also very handsome, is called a mosquito larva. This little guy right here, maybe less so handsome, this is called a midge. And this right here is a mite. All of these organisms live inside this guy. This is the purple pitcher plant, one of our carnivorous plants, but this one is different because it utilizes an ecosystem, or these guys, living inside its pitcher, which by the way is a modified leaf, to get the nitrogen that it needs because the soil doesn't provide it. They're pretty cool. I've got a lot to say about that, but you'll have to ask me on another day. I actually studied these quite in depth, did some research on them. They are very, very cool plants. And that is it for the lecture today. Turn in your notes, please. And if you have any questions, email me as always. Have a great day.